Hello, students, and welcome to Women of FHSS. We're so honored to have one of our amazing alumni coming back to talk to us about some things that she learned in her journey and her really successful career in fashion design. So welcome, Christy. We're so excited to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. So Christy, before we get started, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I grew up in the Northwest, born and raised here, and I'm the oldest of five. There's five of us, and me and my brother were the one. We both went to BYU. I started out as an engineering major. Spent a lot of time in the chemistry labs and realized I was blowing up more things than getting my work done. And as a fluke, I took a sewing 101 class and called my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, guess what? I'm going to be a fashion designer and not an engineer." And his response was, "I'm really glad you're paying for your education." So I graduated in 96 with a bachelor's in fashion design, and next day got married. So I had my bachelor's before I got my MRS. I'm super proud about that. We were married in the Manti Temple and then drove up to Portland, Oregon, and we've been here ever since. So let's see, personally, we have 4 kids, a daughter, 23, marketing major at BYU, Idaho, another daughter, 21. She is data science at BYU, Idaho. And then we have twins, boy, girl, juniors in high school. So full house, and maybe at some point post-COVID will be in a couple years, just me and my husband in the house, which will be super strange. So I graduated in 96, and I've done everything from pattern making to grading to bridal to alterations, assistant designer, worked in a factory. And then 15 years ago, I was really fortunate to get hired on at Nike. So my roles have been either technical design, which is fitting the spec files, that kind of like our contract to the factory, like how we want this garment to look and grade across sizes and a whole lot of other things. And then now I'm a product developer, or a technical developer, and I've been doing that for, 10 years. I am the senior on the MBA team right now. I've been doing that since 2016. So basically product development for MBA and WMBA uniforms. And never a dull moment. Love every minute of it. When I was hired 15 years ago, 2 months into it, my boss pulled me in her office and said, "Do you have a passport?" I'm like, "No." I didn't tell her I'd only been to 5 states in the union. And she's like, "Okay, so go talk to the admin. We're getting you a passport. And are you free these 2 weeks? You're going to go to Korea." So called my husband, super supportive. And he's like, "Well, I used to travel. Now it's your turn." So pre-COVID, I have been all over Asia. Past 5 years, I spent most of the time in Thailand and a little bit in Guatemala and Honduras. That has been amazing to be able to travel. It's not luxury, or it's not a vacation, lots of time in a factory, but to see those parts of the world, I absolutely love it. So yeah, that's what I do.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. I mean, I knew a little bit about you before this interview, but that's incredible. Like, did you ever think that this is where it would lead?
No, I never did. when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I thought, oh, I'm going to make beautiful clothing. Maybe I'll work in Paris. And, there'll be these runway shows where I'm running around in the back and I'll be doing all this stuff. And it is not like that. There are so many, I feel like my degree, I learned the art of sewing, or not sewing, but of like apparel design. I learned how to drape beautiful fabrics. I learned how to the nitty gritty technical of like understanding apparel. And then now, we're especially working at Nike. There are so many things that I would sit in a room with all these other people, take a bazillion notes, try to understand what the acronyms meant, and, just find my people that I could ask the questions to. And never thought I'd live in Excel, live in spec programs, spend so much time communicating over email and other parts of the world. And I think for me, learning, like, yes, I learned a lot in college and I have this degree, but the learning doesn't stop. And I mean, it was in 96, and the things, you learn a foundation, but your career is like you build upon that. You don't have all the tools right when you graduate.
Thank you so much for that, because I think it's important and vital to understand that the education was still important to qualify you for the next step, and that it gave you that foundation. But then your career is what refined that for you. You were able to find joy in all these other areas that you were learning about. So I was wondering, actually, can you share with us some of the reasons why you pursued a career and the benefit that it brings to you?
I'm going to go back to my dad. My dad, so there were 4 sisters and a brother. My dad always told us, work smarter, not harder. And we would question, like, oh, do we have to do this? Or, do we have to, get this degree or do this? And he's like, no, he was the one that's like, you need to get these degrees or get these experiences so that in the long run, you'll have the tools so you're not limiting yourself. And I will say, like, just within my married life, my husband, he had a bachelor's in sociology and was trying to figure out what's the next step for him. And by me having this degree and having a career, it allowed him the option after 4 kids to go back and get his master's in social work. So I don't know financially with 4 kids if we could have, like, where we were at in our lives, it was doable. And yeah, it's crazy, to go back to school and have kids and lives, but we were able to manage it. And I mean, thank goodness I had that degree to fall back on. And like, we've had times too, where he'll run into layoffs or I will. I mean, it's been a huge blessing to be able to fall back on a career, if that makes sense. Like, you just never know. I mean, our company, since I've been there, we've been through a few reorgs, and one recently that is a little crazy. And you just never know. Like, you have to, I don't know, be adaptable. And having that career has allowed me, it's opened more doors instead of limiting the doors I can go through.
And how amazing that you've been able to do that in this partnership with your husband too, right?
Yeah.
That you were able to see the goals that he wanted to achieve, and he sees the goals that you wanted to achieve, and that you've been able to make decisions for your family. And with all the experiences that you bring to the table, those are qualifying experiences for whatever it is that you choose to do. I mean, you probably, with your career, could have gone to several different places because of your qualifications. And yet, this is what happened as a result of that partnership and as a result of that faith and the qualifying experiences that you had. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
So,
I have a kitty.
oh,
I'm like, who are you?
hello, kitty.
She's gonna jump up.
So, one of the things that I was hoping you could talk to us about is, can you name one of the most satisfying career roles that you've had, and then briefly tell us what made it satisfying?
So I'm first going to say it's super personal how something is satisfying. So for something for me that's satisfying might not be for someone else, but for me personally, moving. So I think it was 2015 tail end, Nike got the contract for the NBA, and so they were putting together this department that didn't exist, or they just, you had to have head count and the structure. And I reached out to the hiring manager and I'm like, I'm really interested. My first job at Nike was college basketball and Olympic basketball. And there's something about licensed apparel that it's never a dull moment. And it's super exciting to see your product on the courts. And so I got hired, and that I'm the type of person that every few, like 3 to 4 years, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I feel like I'm getting bored. I can do this in my sleep. I need a new adventure. And my manager keeps asking me like, so how are you doing? Are you bored? How are you, what are you thinking? And I'm like, I am not bored, because I have, through the course of, since 2016, I have been, I've broadened my knowledge base. And then it's just, I would say half the fact that I'm not bored and I keep learning new things. The other part, I have a really supportive director. Like, I love her to death. The other part are just the people I work with. I realized, like, I thought I'm going to be senior tech dev. I'm going to move up to director. One day I'll be VP, or I'll run this. I'll go move over to a factory. And I took this training where you like figure out like what you value, and had to do a breakout session with someone who I didn't know. And I kept saying, yeah, I want to be a manager. I need to have this conversation with my director. But I love the people I work with. I don't want to move. And he's like, can we just stop? It sounds like you value who you work with more than, like, you love what you do. And that's more important than your title. And that, I'm like, done. Thank you for saying it out loud, because that is what it is. And so for me, I love where I'm at currently. And I mean, it's super exciting and super fun. And it's fun to, like, at the beginning, my boss is like, so what teams do you guys want? And I'm like, so I'm not from Utah, but my in-laws are. So Utah Jazz, because I need bragging rights. Yeah. And then just, I was pulled off for a year to work on WNBA, and that's been a really exciting project too. So yeah.
Wow, and how amazing that you had a mentor who was able to kind of give you permission, right? To kind of give you permission to think about that in a way that you hadn't thought about it before. You're like, oh yeah, that's actually exactly right, and that's really neat that you had that experience, and how great it is that you were satisfied with what you were doing, not necessarily the role in which you were doing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like right now I'm basically I'm the lead tech dev on the team. And but again, it's like, it's an amazing team. I have, there's 3 other tech devs I work with, and then designers and product managers and material developer. I mean, there's a whole team of us, but it's just, we're all, it feels like we're all excited to be there. So.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. And there is a lot of value in sticking around somewhere because you like your team too.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really great that you're having that experience.
Yeah.
So kind of stepping backwards a little bit, what would you recommend to someone entering your field?
I think someone told me, look at your next job. Look at what you can learn in your current and then your next job to land your next job. And don't get caught up on the perfect job. I've made the mistake where, you know, there's been, especially one time, I really thought this was the most perfect job ever. And I realized about 6 months in, this was not the fit for me at all. And yeah, so I mean, I just knew, like, okay, lesson learned. I mean, I did learn a lot from that job, things that I didn't know before, and I was stretched, but I knew, like, it wasn't, I knew I needed to move on, and that's okay. But one, don't burn bridges. Do not. Be kind to people. You can stand your ground. My husband's like, you are a completely different person from when I married you. And I'm like, well, you are too, but love you. But I think I had to stand up for myself, and that, and that's fine. I mean, like, constantly learn, like, be a sponge, you know, just again, like, you're not going to know everything out of college. You're just not. Like, I just got smart sheets. I'm like, okay, let me figure this out, because in a week I need to run reports. And, you know, it's just things where it's like, I went to school to learn one thing, but when you have a career, it evolves to the point where I'm like, if they told me my job didn't exist anymore, I'd probably go back and get my MBA, which is not, you know, not what I ever would have said, 25 years ago.
Right. And still could be a possibility. Just saying.
Completely.
It's not like I'm a career coach or anything. Still may be out there. So it's, a lingering thought. But I really liked how you talked about this idea of using every experience as if, even if it's not necessarily the experience that you want, using it in a way that allows you to grow and develop, because you never know when you're going to need to bring whatever it was that you learned in that experience to the table at the next job. I love that. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, it was really helpful. And it also helped frame up, like, you will not have, to be honest, like, there's a lot of jobs where you will not agree with every person in the room, and you will have really crazy deadlines. Like, especially, like, I've worked like 70-hour work weeks for, like, felt like 9 months straight sometimes. Or I've been traveling, like, I mean, this dates me, but before I had a cell phone and before there was Zoom, and and before even you could really use Skype and stuff. And I was traveling out to Asia, and my husband we're not quite sure how we made it, to be quite honest. Like, I'm like, okay, bye. And I will leave you with our little toddler twins. And, like, there was a point when he was in grad school, Madison was high school, Abigail was middle school, the twins were in elementary. And it was like all these school schedules, and I was traveling. And there was a lot of juggling. And One time I went out of town and I did this we have whiteboards in our kitchen, and I wrote everything down. I even the freezer was stocked. Everything was amazing, and I found rides for everybody, but it was all on a whiteboard. And he's like, "You left for the airport, and one of the kids started moving towards the whiteboard." And I had a panic attack because he's like, if it was all erased, I was going to die. So he's like, I took pictures of everything because I just had this moment of sheer fear. And he goes, it all worked out, but yeah. But it was like 2.5 weeks sometimes in Asia. A couple trips were almost 3 weeks. And, you have to, it's teamwork, definitely.
Right. And the thing is you made it work. Like in the
Yeah.
moment, it probably felt really difficult to do, but you made it work.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the questions that we had down for today was talking about this idea of juggling, right, your home life and your career. What was the organizational culture like 10 years ago for women and working mothers? And then what does your company do to make an effort in supporting your personal and professional goals? Because I think that that's something that there are some misunderstandings sometimes about what that could look like, but it also seems to me like there are a lot of organizations out there that are really flexible and allow for that. So can you talk me through that a little bit too?
Yeah. So when we moved up to Oregon in 96, about, well, year and a half later, I had Madison, and my boss sat me down and said, you have 6 weeks off, and then you're back full time. End of discussion. And that's really hard. First time mom. And I was told you can't even have flexible hours. Like, you show up these times or there's someone else that wants your job. And so that's kind of where, I tried that. And, we had childcare, but, I wasn't like full into a career where I had disposable income to just keep her in childcare, nonstop. So my husband got a job where it was 1 to 9, or no, his was like 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. So yeah, a little crazy. So, but we, we tried to make it work. And then I started doing like custom freelancing, whatever on the side. And we just made the decision that I would be at home, but still freelance. And that was interesting to juggle stuff. And then, even 15 years ago, I applied at Nike. I didn't tell them I had 4 kids. I didn't tell them hardly anything. I didn't want to give them a reason not to hire me. And even a couple years into, traveling out to Asia and never giving anyone reason not, I felt like I actually worked harder to prove to everyone that there was no excuse, like they couldn't use my family as an excuse for me not getting the work done. And that was on me. But I remember being on a trip and a coworker who, she didn't have, she was single, and she found out I had 4 kids. And she's like, what? It was just like I had told her that, I have 6 thumbs and they all talk to each other. And she's just like, and I go, and you have 3 dogs. How do you manage? How do you manage? And that was me getting that backbone and standing up for, like, this is me. You hired me for me. And she was just in shock that I could even work or leave or do anything. And I will say that I could have done a better job at just saying, this is who I am. And so about 9 years ago, I found out I have Crohn's. And I hid it from people. I didn't tell anybody. And then I started to have to do these infusions. And, I'd sit in a chair for 3 hours every 6 weeks. And my boss was like, why do you take this time off? Like, she was questioning stuff. And I'm like, oh, it's just a doctor's appointment. And finally, I had to sit down and talk to her. And after that, she's like, Christy, you idiot. Why didn't you tell me before? So I think on my side, it took me a while to just, I just had to, I don't know. It's just, I think like showing my whole self to people. And not saying like show my whole self and, like, here's all my issues and here's this and here's my excuses, but just like, hey, I enjoy gardening, and I enjoy this. And my weekends are spent with volleyball and football and, going to concerts because my daughter's in the Philharmonic. And, I think it's like, yes, you guys go golfing and I do this and the other person does this. And I would say in the last, well, to be honest, like this year and I would say the last 5 years, I've felt this huge shift with acceptance and just kind of and especially this year, I took a class where it's like, show your whole self. And the more we do that, the more we realize everybody hasn't been doing that. And I don't know. I think that for me, it just took a long time to get there. I just felt like maybe it was those stereotypes of growing up where honestly, if you're LDS, you should be home with your little kids and canning. And I didn't, and I'm like, I know.
Which is still okay for some people, right? And that's still, if that's what somebody wants to do, that's still okay, right?
Yeah. And I have felt, I'm trying to think of the right word. I have felt judged by women in the church because I have a career. And I've also felt, just people who are like, that's awesome. And I work here and I run around with my kids all day. And I think just the more like across the board, people can show their true self. It's like everybody has differences. And I don't know. Phrase my dad also said, like, if we were all vanilla, it'd be a boring world. So, and that's the thing, like in your career, in your family, everybody has differences and you're able to look at things a little differently. And I don't know. I've been very fortunate at Nike, and I've seen this like, and it's probably just across the board, just in general, where I feel like there's this culture change of like accepting and just like embracing differences. So, yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing something so personal. I think it's a really hard conversation to have, and we're seeing those conversations come out a little bit more. Some things that I wrote down is, sometimes I feel like women don't share the things in their personal life because they don't want to be looked at as busy. I'm too busy to be given these opportunities. And I think that that's something that we're seeing more research on, or, please don't pass me up for this opportunity because you know that I'm also working with 4 children at home and
Yeah.
running them,
Yeah.
don't pass me up. I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm available, I'm capable. I've made it work this much in my life. There's no reason to question that I'm going to do my job well. And I like how you were able to articulate that.
Yeah. And I think too, my particular degree or my job at, Nike, and there's there's more women than men. And I've been lucky enough to have mentors that, they're working mothers. And my favorite was when I got hired, the director, so she was like 2 levels above, she wanted to have a one-on-one with me. And she sat me down and she goes, so tell me about yourself. And I hadn't really told anybody like, oh, I have 4 kids. So she was deep asking about like my personal life. And I told her, I have 4 kids. The youngest are twins. And she's like, stop right there. She goes, my kids are twins. I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, so let me tell you about me. I quit when my kids were little, and that way I could just be with them. And then when they went to school, I went back to work. And I was so excited because I'm like, she's this director. Like, she's, yeah, she's done amazing things. And then even, I think it was like 4 years ago, she was, she ended up leaving the company, and she's like, my twins, I want to spend a few more years with them. I'm like, kudos to you. Like, that's amazing. Like, and that's the thing. It's like, I think there's also the stereotype that if you don't stay working, you can't go back to a career. And that's so wrong. Again, everybody can learn what you can. And even like for me, I was doing freelance and learned a ton about managing expectations and, and deadlines, because there's no one else you can blame if something doesn't hit the deadline, and working with people. And yeah, there's just build on everything. Every experience means something, and you learn what you like and what you don't. And even like in church callings, it's like, it's funny because every time we move in a ward, they're like, oh, you must know how to sew, so you must know how to be crafty, so we're going to put you on the homemaking committee. And I'm like, no, I'm not crafty at all. So thank heavens for Pinterest, because that saved my life. I'm like, okay, so you guys are interested in this. Let me see what other humans have done. And yeah, I normally get pulled out of that calling pretty quickly. They're like, oh, she was serious. She's not crafty. She can't do the wood stuff and the painting stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, bunny ears. I'm like, oh.
That is so funny. I tell people all the time, I'm not crafty, I'm Pinteresty. There's a total difference.
Oh, yeah.
Total difference.
It's what I aspire to.
Right. I have a lot of boards that are just going to be my boards.
Exactly.
That's so funny. I'm actually so glad that you talked about this mentor that you had, because one of the questions I had, and I know it was more about just networking in general, but I'd rather ask you more about your mentorship experience. How important do you feel it is for women who are graduating to, what should they look for in a mentor? And maybe just tell us about some other mentors that have helped you along this career journey.
Well, going to Nike, that was a huge shift in everything. And I was hired as a tech design too. And there was another tech designer hired around the same time. And our manager said, here's what I want you to do. Because you guys are both new to Nike, I want you to, here's a list of people. And it was a pretty long list. And they were all directors or managers in tech design or development. And she says, you are setting up one-on-ones with every single one of these, and you are going to find out what they look for in a good tech designer, and then what they look for if, say, I want to become a senior, like how to move up. And some, I mean, the thing is that like big corporations, it's overpower. I mean, you're just like, I don't know anybody. And there's all these buildings, and, you know, I'm supposed to know who all these people are in these meetings. And that was probably the best thing that I could have done, because I have been able to network with these people that are directors who still know me to this day. And I learned so much about, here's what my job is and here's what I need to do. I would say mentoring, it's like I had one person that I would go to if I had a crazy pattern question. I would have another person that I'm like, you're really good at factory relations, and I'm having a difficult time here. And so I think just asking those questions, setting up little meetings with people. And I mean, I've also had mentors outside of companies, and it also could be like, you know, if you want to learn how to do better at public speaking, there's, what is it, Toastmasters, or, you know, there's all kinds of ways to like get mentored in any subject. And a lot of like, I mean, Illustrator, I didn't, I was pre that in college. So it's all self-taught. And and so I've leaned on, you know, some designers where I'm like, hey, I'll bring you cookies if you help me for 4 hours. And they're super happy. But yeah, I think, and even my current director, she actually has done that. She did that exact same thing. She's like, I don't want you, but with her, she's like, I want you to meet with this person to know how you should interact with them. Mm-hmm. So I would set up time with my material developer, and then with my different designers, and then with the, you know, the marketing, and like all these different people, just to know how they expect me to come to the table. And it just, I think, don't be afraid to reach out. And honestly, most people are not hired because they know everything, and don't act like you do. You're hired because of these skills, and it could even be like your personality and how they feel like you would fit within that group. You're hired because the skills you have will bring something to the table, and not because you know everything.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think that's a big misunderstanding and misnomer, is that you have this list of qualifications and you think, well, I haven't met every single one, so I must not be qualified. If they hired somebody that had all of those, they're just going
to take their job.
Yeah, exactly. They would just get bored, and then all this training that went into an individual was kind of a waste of resources.
Yeah, I've been on a lot of hiring panels, and you know, we've actually not hired people because we felt like they would get bored. Mm-hmm. I've had some temps. One in particular, she was there a week, and my coworker was on one of these trips out to Asia, and she's like, so when do I travel? And I'm like, oh, well, did you finish this project I asked you to get done? No, but I'm just really curious, when's it my turn? And I go, so you need to have an actual black badge, meaning you're a permanent employee. And then you would need to be in a category where that would work. But I go, you're working with 2 seniors. And so more than likely, you probably won't be going right away. But what I can tell you is you could probably get that project done. That would be great.
You have to
Yeah,
earn your way, right? So
you
sometimes you're
do.
seeing that people are asking you questions where you say, well, let's work into this. Let's, make
Yeah.
sure. And it sounds to me like you're a mentor for several people to help them understand that.
Yeah. And I've done a lot of the like training in my department as we get new hires in. And it's really just, really just being their coach through it, like giving them the framework and then just being a coach. And so like I just think reaching out to anybody and, just like, hey, can I just meet with you for 10 minutes? It's not like you're setting up hours and hours of meetings, and you just never know where it'll lead. You never know. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience. I think as we wrap up today, I'd love to know from you anything that you feel would empower our women students to pursue what they choose post-graduation, whether or not it's fulfilling grad school opportunities, staying at home if they choose, part-time, full-time. Is there anything else that you would want to share that you would want our students to know?
I think for me, like if I could tell my, 21-year-old self, I had a vision when I was in college or even in high school that I would, and it looked a lot different, even down to like our house. It's a 1947, like we called our little cottage. And it's like, we've learned home improvement along the way because of it, and painfully. And but there are so many things that I guess I'm like, I didn't sign up for Crohn's, and I always said, oh, I just want kids one at a time, so I jinxed myself there. And there's all these things that I thought they're just things. And I think like through this year, especially, a lot of people are learning those things that we hold on to, even if it means like attending church in person. Like there's other ways to be active. I'm not, eventually everything will go back, but, you know, things evolve, including yourself, including like your marriage, and including your career, everything, there's growth. And I think we find that like in the gospel, like you don't know you don't go to the temple once and call it a day. You're learning every time you go. And your relationship with even your kids, it's like, be okay for those speed bumps. Be okay that you're going to have rough days or years, or, things that you really didn't. You're like, my 21-year-old person didn't sign up for this. It's totally fine. It's like, I love Hinckley, how he says, not every marriage is perfect. Not every, like he lists all these things, it's like, you will have rough jobs, you will have this, but it's absolutely fine. And for me, it's like it's been like a journey to accept that. I'm still a control freak, but I think having twins, I was like, and I have no control over this. This is happening. I have to buy a minivan. That was the worst thing. I loved my Nissan Altima.
Yeah, I'm anti-minivan. I get it.
I will say, when you're pregnant with twins, you look like you're about 50 months pregnant. So we waited till the last minute just because I was in denial of getting a minivan. We had an awesome deal. He thought we were like, I was literally in labor half the time. And so he's like, no, I'll go back. We'll get a better deal. And my husband at one time, he's like, maybe we should pour water on the floor and say your water broke. And I'm like, no. but yeah. But
That's awesome.
but like I've had career, I've had work from home, I've had, like, even in college, like I didn't get married till after I graduated, and I had to come to this point where I'm like, what if I don't get married right now? Like, I need to be okay with me. And so things, it's just, and I have, one of my best friends, like, she's widowed at 50. And like, my mom was also widowed at 50. And like, there's all these good, bad, just life changes, and everybody's going to have it. And the families that you look at and the people you look at where you're like, I want to be just like them, they have the perfect life, more than likely they don't. And that's okay. So like, just show up with your real self, and that's at church, with your family, like with yourself, especially. Just be you. And that, I don't know, it just goes far, because the more, like, I think for me, like when I've tried to be like, no, I'm going to give the appearance that I can be here at 6 a.m. and I will leave at 9 p.m. and I'll be working through midnight, and yeah, put me on every single trip known to man, no problem. I think it's okay to just like show up with your real self, and just, you don't have to do everything. And I will say one last word of advice. It's okay if your house is not clean all the time.
Amen.
Yeah, it is absolutely fine.
So glad you said that. Students, I hope you're listening, because that's a big one.
I know. That's why you have kids. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right? Shoot, how does that work for my toddlers? I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
I know, put Cinderella on or something.
Right.
Look, she's cleaning. Yeah.
Do what she's doing.
Yeah. And just like, do, like, my mother-in-law, she's awesome, because she's like, you have to force like family fun. You have to force things. And so just taking time to just step back. And I think for me, especially this year, like we were running 1,000,000 miles a minute, and being able to just step back from that it was much needed without the pandemic. But yeah, the slowing down was very nice. So yeah, but be adaptable. I mean, my job, they never said I'd be able to work from home. I'm getting shipments of garments from all over the world. They must think I'm like a shopaholic, but I have a dress form, rows of samples. Yeah.
You're keeping shipping alive and well.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, Christy, thank you so much for the advice. I really, really hope that things continue to work. I love the advice that you gave about being adaptable. And I think that it's going to be something, as people continue to hire through what has happened, that's going to be a huge priority for a lot of people, is finding individuals who can adapt. And so I'm really glad that was one of the pieces of advice that you gave our students today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Yeah.